So, hello everyone, thank you for coming. I'm Dr. Jane Rowling, I'm the Farm and Rural Liaison Officer for Calder Rivers Trust, and I'm here tonight to talk about multiple benefits of healthy soils. So my role with the Rivers Trust is to talk to farmers, to rural people, to landowners, and to try to help people to improve their biodiversity, carbon capture and water quality. So you might be wondering now, why on earth is the Rivers Trust interested in soils? What have soils got to do with rivers? So on a night like tonight, or when there's just a drizzle, every drop of rain that lands on our catchment is going to land somewhere where it might flow into the river. We believe that healthy soil underpins a prosperous and resilient landscape. So what we want is to make sure that every drop of water that ends up in the river isn't going to contribute to a flood, and we can do that by helping produce healthy soils. So when the soil lands on the surface of the ground, it can either percolate into the subsurface, so that's the soil and the rock. It can stay at the surface, being stored or flowing. Some of the water is going to be pulled into plants, it's going to evaporate from the surface, it's going to transpire from the surface of the plant leaves. But the path that a water drop takes is very much dependent on where it lands and the soil quality if it lands on the soil. If it lands on a hard surface like tarmac, it's going to flow straight off, as Sarah Jane was saying, into the drains. If it lands on the soil, it's going to flow down into the soil. And how fast it reaches the river through that path is very much dependent on how sponge-like and rough the surface of the land is. So if we have a nice rough surface that the water can't flow off, then that's going to slow the water down. So, if we have healthy soil, I will get this right at some point, if we have healthy soil, how the particles fit together is going to be really important for how fast that water flows. Healthy soil should have lots and lots of vertical pores, lots of fissures between the surface. That's going to help water flow down into it nice and deep. It's going to help air get through, and all that water and air is going to carry nutrients. It's going to make for really healthy plant growth. If the soil's unhealthy and you dig a nice big hole and have a look at your soil, you might find kind of horizontal fissures in that soil, and that's a platey soil structure, so you might see it in plates, and that suggests that the water's going to be held up. I like to get my hands in, have a feel of the soil, have a smell of it. We don't lick it, that's too far, but we like to have a nice smell of it. If there's a kind of unpleasant smell, that suggests that the water's been sitting in there for a long time, and that's not really what we want. If we find that the soil is really compacted, so it's really hard, then it's going to lose those really nice fissures and pores within it. That means that the water is going to stop. And where we see that platey structure, this is where we've got layers of compaction that are stopping the water from getting down. Every time you've got a compacted layer, that's starting to act more and more like tarmac or concrete. The water's going to run straight off it. It can't get in. If we have lovely healthy soil with plenty of fissures, that's going to help the plants to grow. It helps lots of things pass through it. And when it comes down to it in farming, the soil is there to provide space for the grass to grow, nutrients for crops, to provide food. But there's so much more that healthy soil can do for us. If we have lots of deep-rooting plants and trees, as Christina was talking about, they're going to help the soil to stay together. That means we've got less erosion, there's less soil being washed away off the slopes and into the rivers. If we get soil in the rivers, that starts to choke up our ecosystems, and that starts to affect the invertebrate populations and then the bigger species that feed on them. So we really want to hold the soil where it is on the hillsides, and we can do that by getting nice deep-rooting plants, nice deep-rooting trees to really hold that structure together. So well-managed woodlands and ancient grasslands are really important for our soils. They also support a huge diversity of species, and this is where we get our biodiversity. So if we can protect our river ecosystems by preventing the silt from getting in, we're getting more biodiversity in the rivers. If we can get a nice variety of species in the grasslands, in the woodlands, on the hillsides, then that's going to support other ecosystems as well, and it all comes down to this resilient, healthy soil. The more vegetation of different sizes and different kinds that we have, the more sponge-like the surface becomes. So imagine the difference between pouring water onto a hard surface or onto your kitchen sponge. The sponge is going to suck up a lot more water and hold it there. This also has the added benefit of filtering the water through layers of soil and gravel, whatever else is beneath the surface in a healthy soil. So anything that's been put onto the top of the land, so we're talking fertilisers, herbicides, pesticides, any kind of farmyard manure, instead of being washed straight off into the river where it causes problems, it filters out, it stays in the soil. So we get the lovely clean water that Slow the Flow was showing coming out of the attenuation pond in comparison to the dirty water that was running down the road. Oh. Maybe I won't get it right. So at Calder Rivers Trust, as I said, we believe that a healthy soil underpins a prosperous and resilient landscape. We support soil health by working with farmers and landowners as part of a catchment as a whole to provide information which enables farmers and landowners to make informed decisions about what work they'd like to do on their land. So we're already providing a lot of information on soil health over at our table over here, with all of our lovely leaflets, which are free to anyone to take. For anyone who's got an interest in horses and other kinds of rural land management away from agriculture, we have just launched at the beginning of last month an online course which is about grassland management and alternative grazing systems for horses. I know if anyone who's got horses or any farmers in the room will know that horses can create a mess. And I know my horses create a mess, and I'm very sorry for it. But we can help to reduce that poaching by managing their grassland differently and thinking about our soils and getting to know our soils better. We're also working on our pinpoint survey capabilities. So this is something that's been launched by the National Rivers Trust. We would go out to a farm, we'd have a look around. This is completely free, completely confidential. And this is how we'd start to look at your land and start to suggest opportunities, possibly to get where you could get funding, where you can save money. It's completely confidential, as I said. Nothing is going to be reported to anyone, but we might suggest if something is causing a problem that might be a priority to fix. You can then get a report from that, and that's how you can start to make an informed decision, but there's no pressure to do so. If you want to have a chat about it, again, I'm over at the table over there. Please. So, maybe you're not a farmer or a landowner, but you can also do lots of things to help. So if you're out in the countryside, one of the big things that you can do is following the countryside code. So this will help. It sounds like such a small thing, but wearing the right footwear, sticking to the footpaths, this is going to stop that thing where you go along the footpath and there's a puddle. I think this has just died. And everybody has just walked around, and this muddy area has got bigger and bigger. Everywhere that there's mud, that soil structure is going to be breaking down, and we get more compaction, unhealthy soils. If we can keep to the footpaths, that's really going to help in that little area. We'll get less puddling, less mud, and less runoff. So if you take your litter home with you, it's not getting into the watercourses, it's not going to get into the wildlife and cause damage, it's not going to hurt livestock. It's also not going to block any small culverts or drains or anything like that. So just following the countryside code is a huge thing that can help. If you do have a field, some of your own land, then try to protect the areas that are high traffic, so where animals tend to gather, where you've got gateways where people are driving through a lot. If we can protect the gateways by putting, for example, a hardcore surface down. I've got a friend who's protected her gateways by using those soft mats that you get in playgrounds, in parks. They were being recycled. She's put them in her field gateway. It's doing a marvellous job. And also, if you've got watercourses on your land, try to protect the banks. So we get a lot of breakdown of banks by animals trying to get down to drink. Then they're pooing in the water. It's not great. If you can put a fence up, you've got a multiple benefit there. You're protecting the bank, protecting the soil that makes up the bank, and you've also got a lovely area where you can start to get some biodiversity. You can put some wildflowers in. It'd be marvellous. And finally, if it's just your garden, there's still things you can do. We've mentioned water butts frequently. I think this might be a water butt sales convention undercover. But if you can collect the rain from your roofs, that's not flowing straight into the drains, as Sarah Jane said. You can also then use it in your garden and save yourself a bit of money. If you keep a grass area or a gravel area where water can infiltrate, again, that's not flowing off the surface. So that's another way to get the water into the soil, to slow the flow down. And thank you very much. That's everything from me.